Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bryan Garcia. I am President and CEO of the Connecticut Green Bank. Thank you for joining us today for our third webinar in the 2021 series. Last week, President Biden announced a $2.3 trillion American jobs plan. The biggest chunk of $1.3 trillion would go towards infrastructure spending. Beyond infrastructure, about $600 billion would go towards workforce development, manufacturing, and research and development. Public investment in R&D lays the foundation for the future breakthroughs that over time yield new businesses, new jobs, and more exports. The plan will invest $40 billion in upgrading research infrastructure in laboratories across the country, including half of those funds reserved for historically Black colleges and universities and other minority-serving institutions, including the creation of a new national lab focused on climate that will be affiliated with the historic Black college and university. I'm happy to report that within the Biden plan is the Clean Energy and Sustainability Accelerator, also known as the National Climate Bank. Green banks at the local and state level have worked hard to enable private investment in solutions to confront climate change, including with the priority focus on our most vulnerable communities. So thank you to the Coalition for Green Capital and the American Green Bank Consortium. Beyond the Biden plan, new clean energy technologies and business models are developing right here in our backyard in the state of Connecticut. Connecticut Innovations, or CI, is leading the way, supporting clean energy entrepreneurs
I'm going to call 100 people. You guys need, I can't take the call.
And the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, or PURA, is seeking to launch a state regulatory sandbox, providing public utilities the chance to pilot with local innovators to put game-changing technologies on their systems. So today's webinar is focused on clean tech in Connecticut, a sandbox for local innovators. We have a great program for you, including keynote remarks at the outset from Marissa Gillette, Chair of PURA. Following those remarks, an introduction to innovation in Connecticut and the innovators on our panel by Matt McCooe, CEO of Connecticut Innovations, and a panel of 3 entrepreneurs who are advancing the clean energy technologies that have the potential to support an equitable modern grid. We invite all of you to submit your questions as we progress through today's program. It is an honor to introduce our keynote address today, Marissa Gillette, Chair of the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. Governor Lamont nominated Marissa, and her appointment was confirmed by both the House and the Senate of the Connecticut General Assembly in 2019. Chair Gillette represents Connecticut on the board of directors of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. She comes to Connecticut having served as Vice President of External Relations for the Energy Storage Association. I can attest to her incredible abilities to be inclusive of stakeholders within the regulatory process to solicit their ideas and feedback in order to comprehensively implement the public policies of Connecticut. Prior to the Energy Storage Association, she worked at the Maryland Public Service Commission, an independent agency that regulates public utilities, where she served as senior advisor to the chairman. Connecticut is extremely fortunate to have Marissa Gillette leading PURA in guiding our state forward to an equitable modern grid. Chair Gillette, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, President Garcia. It's my pleasure to be here with everyone this afternoon, especially to speak about this topic. As Bryan knows, equitable modern grid is very near and dear to my heart. I think it is I know it's the most important thing that Governor Lamont asked me to tackle when I started coming up on my 2-year anniversary. So for those of you that aren't yet familiar with our equitable modern grid and the initiatives that come out of that, what I'm referring to is a framework document that PURA issued in October of 2019. And in this document, we set out the objectives and the tracks that we are hoping to pursue, which is our approach to a comprehensive modernization of the electric grid in Connecticut. So those 4 main objectives that we've set out to tackle are number 1, to enable an economy-wide decarbonization effort to occur. The second objective is to create a more resilient, reliable, and secure commodity. The third is to advance energy affordability. And the fourth is to support the growth of the green economy. So those objectives, while each of them are, something that could drive a number of initiatives in and of themselves, and also can sometimes seem like they're competing with each other, we have taken great pains to orient the agency not just in the equitable modern grid proceeding around these 4 objectives, but really as an agency overall. And the objectives have led us into 11 separate tracks, which are the equitable modern grid proceeding is comprised of. And one of those 11 tracks is the 5th track is innovation pilots, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. Really, 11, while it sounds ambitious to me, it really could have been hundreds of tracks. There are so many ways in which Connecticut's infrastructure and our electric grid need to be modernized to meet the challenges that we're facing today. So we could have done hundreds of tracks, but really what we focused on were these 11, and we knew in this 5th track of innovation pilots, we're never going to be able to drive the most innovation or peak solutions through a traditional regulatory process. So what we thought of with this track was to create a process where we could fill in the gaps between the other 10 tracks that we've set up and the hundreds that we could have pursued. And in this track, creating a process and really just a space where we could incentivize and encourage the most nascent of ideas and help them grow into their own track someday. And I think just for framing purposes, if you'd asked anyone where we were going to be today 10 years ago, I'm sure we wouldn't have guessed that all the major car manufacturers are pushing electric vehicles, or wouldn't have guessed that President Biden was just going to announce a 30 gigawatt offshore wind target. There's also major energy storage targets out there as well. And myself and my team aren't here to try to project where we're going to be in 10 years. But what this track can do, or what we're trying to set it up to do, is create the flexibility and the ability for both the current PURA as a regulatory body and future PURA to adapt and be able to foster and incentivize new solutions and ideas that can all tie back to those 4 objectives of the equitable modern grid that I started with. What we're not going to do through this docket and what we're not trying to do is necessarily dismantle the inherent monopolies of the distribution electric companies. We are recognizing that there is that inherent monopoly, but we are also saying not only can you introduce competition for other services, but we definitely need competition in the ideation space. For anyone that's familiar with the REV process in New York, the Reforming the Energy Vision, which started last decade, that's kind of the spirit with which we are trying to infuse into our equitable modern grid process in this 5th track as a whole. And if you're sitting there and you're somewhat familiar with PURA or you've interacted with us in the past decade, you might think to yourself that what you're hearing me say isn't exactly new. And you're not wrong. We are trying, if you are familiar with the EEP program or the Electric Efficiency Partners program, you may think some of what I'm talking to you about today it sounds familiar. And what we're trying to do is leverage that program, which exists today and has had some success. We're trying to leverage that program and best practices that have emerged both in the United States and overseas into a regulatory sandbox 2.0. So, briefly, I just want to touch on the process to date because I think that it informs how you can interact with us moving forward to bring this 5th track to its culmination. So today what we did was held a number of solutions days, not just in this track, but others, where we brought together different, what I would refer to as non-traditional stakeholders in a regulatory process, and asked them what solutions they could do to overcome the barriers. And there are a number of barriers to this track. The regulatory, I don't think it's a secret that traditional utility regulation is not particularly nimble or adaptable. And so with that comes a number of barriers to setting up a process to achieve what we were trying to do. So the solutions days got us started. It led us very quickly to the conclusion we needed help. So we looked to a consultant who's done similar work. By similar work, I mean setting up a regulatory sandbox in other jurisdictions. We retained that consultant, and we started by doing some ground truthing on US best practices and some of the best practices that we've seen overseas. For example, the United Kingdom has a regulator who created the first, well, I think one of the first regulatory sandboxes in the electric space that was derived from the model in the financial industry. Since then, there have been other models that we can look at, like just over the border in New York, the Rev Connect process. So following that kind of ground truthing exercise, last fall or late December, we issued a strategic vision document for what we were trying to achieve here. And in short, we're trying to bring in competition and find avenues for third parties and our incumbent utilities to better collaborate. Sometimes all it takes is a connection, sometimes getting your foot in the door to these utilities that can be, multi-jurisdictional is, one step further than you may have gotten before. So, we're really used to these tried and true methods in the regulatory world, and introducing new ideas to that regime takes a very deliberate process that we're trying to work through here. And the approach generally is to take a portfolio approach, trying to find a safe space to balance out the risks. In the regulatory world, we're very risk averse, both the regulators and the regulated. So we've outlined that strategic vision that speaks to all of those items that I've just referenced. In response to that strategic vision document, we received a number of stakeholder comments, and in response, we have recently, I believe it was last Monday, issued a straw proposal detailing what a potential program design looks like here. And to that, we brought the mentality of failing fast. I think that's a theme that you will see, both in the strategic vision document as well as that straw proposal. And by failing fast, what I'm trying to drive at here is a mechanism by which we can balance, that risk aversion that I was referencing with the need to bring innovation to the regulatory space. But I want to be very clear that what we are trying to achieve here is not innovation for the sake of innovation. I think that there is absolutely a place for that. The regulatory world is I don't think the place for that. What we're trying to do is create this safe space where we can look to identify solutions that can scale up quickly, and if we find through the process that idea that's been brought to us into the sandbox is not capable of scaling, or is more appropriate in another setting. That's what I mean by failing fast, is that we have some off ramps built into this proposed program design to minimize the ratepayer risk here. So now that we've released this straw proposal, what I'm here hoping to convince you of is to engage in our process moving forward. If you're less familiar with how the regulatory world works, what we're doing with this straw proposal is taking feedback and then incorporating that, and then we will come back out with a draft decision and a final decision before this process is truly ready for prime time. So what's happening tomorrow actually is a workshop where we are going to, kind of level set everyone and our stakeholders on how this straw proposal is intended to function. So if you're available tomorrow at 11 a.m., we'd love to have you, because what we really need is folks on the ground who would actually participate in this process to advise us as to whether it's something you would even do. Because just like we're not here to do innovation for innovation's sake, we're also, not here to create processes that won't be used, because that's not a good use of anyone's time. So if you're not able to join us tomorrow, then no worries. We still have other opportunities for feedback. The straw proposal is available for your reading and review at any time. And I think I'll just close on there are 2 or 3 main takeaways from that straw proposal that I'll just kind of whet your appetite with. The first is it proposes to include an innovation advisory council, so that key stakeholders can provide input throughout the process, hopefully driving towards a more collaborative end result. The second key takeaway is that there are 3 proposed pathways to participate in the process. The first being project proposals specifically from third parties. The second being proposals from the incumbent utilities themselves. And then the third pathway being for more combination projects where a third party and a utility have already met up and thought through a design. So the structure of the program will have 4 phases. This will be very iterative and looking to repeat this for many years to come. Hopefully I've caught your interest, and if after you review this straw proposal, you think to yourself, there's no way I would participate in that, or I would participate if Pure would tweak this aspect of it, we are all ears and really happy to receive any feedback to make this workable, because the regulatory space in Connecticut could really use some and fresh ideas and infusion of new processes and new technologies. We have a lot of ambitious goals, and we need help achieving them in the most cost-effective way possible. So I want to thank everyone for attending and hearing me out, and looking forward to the rest of the presentations today from 3 innovators who I think I'd love to see in our process down the road. So looking forward to that conversation. And back to you, President Garcia. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Chair Gillette, for that vision of an equitable modern grid broadly and a regulatory sandbox specifically. The 4 objectives that you laid out at the outset were, for the audience, you should just, decarbonization, resilience, energy affordability, green economy. I mean, those are extraordinary foundations to build on. And it's no wonder that Governor Lamont brought you here to our great state, Chair Gillette, and thank you for leading this process. I'm going to ask either Rudy or Andrea on my team to include a link in the chat. So literally while we're having this webinar, tomorrow's workshop, you all should click the link, register, get signed up, get involved in the proceeding. All right, so let me now turn from the innovation of a regulatory sandbox to innovation in technology, entrepreneurship, and investment. When we think about early stage investment in Connecticut, all of us should think about Connecticut Innovations. Matt McCooe is the CEO of Connecticut Innovations. I'm going to let Matt introduce CI, but he and his team manage a full array of business startup and growth initiatives, including venture and equity investment, funds, loans and loan guarantees, and programs to support innovation, entrepreneurship, collaboration, and commercialization. He comes to Connecticut from Chart Venture Partners, a New York City-based technology venture capital firm. He was a director at Columbia University Science and Technology Ventures, where he helped launch and manage a portfolio of spin-out companies. During his tenure, 11 portfolio companies went public or were acquired by publicly traded companies. Prior to Columbia, Matt co-founded Eureka Networks, a communications and application software organization, which was eventually sold for more than $100 million. So he knows how to do it. Matt is going to introduce us to Connecticut Innovations and introduce our three panelists who are portfolio companies of CI today. Matt McCooe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, everybody, for being on. Hopefully, you are getting a flavor for how different Connecticut is becoming and what a unique place it is from the government's perspective. Connecticut Green Bank, they launched the CPACE program, which has been replicated nationally. Bryan's been recognized globally for his work. Chair Gillett is coming forward with all these great new ideas and a zeal for innovation and change, which has been welcomed and recognized by everybody. She did it in Maryland, and she's doing it again here, and it's really fun to be able to have coworkers who are as excited about innovation and change and are embracing the future. And obviously, with new President Biden and his commitment to clean tech, this is obviously this next 8 years, I think, are going to be just a gangbuster time for companies that are in this sector. So just a couple of words about CI and what we're doing in clean tech. So we've invested close to $10 million across 6 very, very strong clean tech companies here in Connecticut. The revenues for just these 6 companies are now north of $200 million for this coming year, which is remarkable by any measure. Forget about just for Connecticut. There was one company which amazingly spun out of Connecticut Green Bank, Greenworks Lending, which I was introduced by Peter Londa. I was introduced to the CEO, Jessica Bailey, through Pete. They're good friends. You'll hear from Pete in a moment. But Jessica took the CPACE idea, privatized it, launched a company around it, and she sold it to TIA Karef Nuveen at a really terrific intergenerational changing price for her, and continues to have the jobs here and growing in Connecticut. Peter went public this year. He'll talk more about Tantalus Systems, but Pete had an IPO this year. He's now been listed. 2 other of our companies are being aggressively courted by SPACs. So we have 6 companies, and you'll hear from Dan and Christina in a moment, but our 6 companies are punching way above their weight. And as a result, Governor Lamont, Commissioner Lehman, and I are talking about how we can do more in clean tech, green tech, and sustainable investing in Connecticut. We know we've got the chops. We know we've got the entrepreneurs, and with the support of Chair Gillette and Eversource and Avangrid and the Green Bank, we think we can really do something special here to sort of leverage the wins we've already had. So one last thing I wanted to say about what CI is doing as relates to these conversations. For companies in the state that are in our portfolio, we're also launching an innovation lab where we're going to put cash and resources into companies that are going to get into that sandbox that Chair Gillette was talking about. So, if there's a project that Dan, Christina, or Pete want to launch with Eversource or Avangrid or on behalf of Pura, CI will actually fund the proof of concept work. So we'll pay to get those projects launched and sampled just to prove the results and show the buying community and the public, how good these things are and prove that they actually can get the results that we're talking about. So, okay, that's it on CI. Sorry for that little commercial, but we're really proud of what we're doing in clean tech. And like I said, there's going to be more to come. I'm mostly proud, though, that we've invested in these 3 extraordinary serial entrepreneurs, which means people who've had more than one success under the belt. So I'll get into that a little bit. Starting with Dr. Christina Lampa-Onnerud. She is a member of the Royal Swedish Academy. She's a 2-time technology pioneer recognized by the World Economic Forum, for which she still serves as the co-chair of the Global Futures Council on Energy. She's, a requested speaker at Davos, on the Inc. 100 top 100 female founders list. She's a highly sought after speaker. And that's based on, partly on the work that she's doing now with the founder and CEO of Cadenza Innovations, which you'll hear about, but they're doing incredibly interesting lithium-ion batteries for portable electronics, electric vehicles, and utilities. Started this in 2012, and she's proven that the technology works, and she's now about to hopefully expand this year in a meaningful way here in Connecticut. Earlier in her career, she was the CEO and chairman of Boston Power, which is a really well-publicized company where they raised $400 million, set up plants in Asia, created a massive number of jobs, and is still a leader in that market. So we're really fortunate to have Christina here today. Next up is Dan Nadev, who's the CEO of Enviropower. Dan's got 15 years developing and deploying distributed generation technologies in the US and Europe. He's an expert in commercializing advanced energy technologies, and he's led multiple product launches across the renewable technologies categories, from geothermal to wind to heat recovery, heat and power, which is where he is today. And he's worked with companies such as Ormat Technologies, Repower, Siemens, and Q Energy. Dan's motto is power for the people. Last up is my old and one of my dearest friends, Pete Londa, who's the president and CEO of Tantalus Systems. Pete's been in the smart grid technology for 20 years, serving as the CEO of Tantalus today, which, as I just mentioned, they just went public. We're a proud participant in that IPO. It's going to be a great outcome for CI. Prior to Tantalus, he was on the board of directors for World Energy Solutions, which is a publicly traded company. He also was the chief executive officer of BPL Global, which is another smart grid company. And I actually saw Pete take that company from a turnaround where the company was on its back all the way to selling it to Danaher for a 9 figures outcome. So first up, please, Christina, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really delighted to be here. And if I could have the first slide, please. Cadenza Innovation is so proud to be here, to be a partner with CI, the whole team, really amazing experience. We started the company with a lot of backgrounds in electrification. Many of us participated early on in the portable power era, and we learned about how safety was compromised by cost. And at the same time, there was a third vector going in our space, which was the energy density increased year over year, and was pretty remarkable. You can think of a battery as a little chemical factory in a canister. So we decided to put together a company as we launched our previous company into 90 restrictions and over 160 patents, and to sit back and say, now when we go from small electrification to big scale electrification, what does that mean? And how can we be agile students from the past and take this forward? So we saw the opportunity to participate in this energy transformation where the dramatic change happens over 50 years. This is a long marathon. It's going to happen over a long time. How could you participate early on and be a valued player to assist both the existing paradigm and an invitation to future technologies? So we set these 3 goals: low cost, and we defined it as it has to be able to participate in the policy frameworks, the markets surrounding electricity, and the content for which that electricity is serving. We had a lot of insights in electric cars. We participated in that also for almost 20 years and had some insight in where the grid reformation would happen and how the energy transition would work. We decided to use our knowledge, everything from atoms to electronics to mechanical engineering, and we distilled it to a very simple concept. We would build a Lego block of energy where all the safety would be on the inside, all the performance would anticipate innovation in the future, and we would be able to incorporate it. The Achilles heel of the battery industry has always been attraction of capex and then high yield in manufacturing. If you nail those 2, and you have an eye to the future, this is an extremely profitable type of business to run. So we knew something about that, having built some gigafactories in the past. And then the third leg of the stool is high energy density. So if you just simply shed all the overhead and focus on what really delivers the electricity, and you target it to the application itself. So you can be very specific on power and voltage and duration and temperature and how it talks to the different parts of the way we think about electricity in general. And with that, we reduce to practice something that we think can really be a new standard for the future. So next slide, please. This slide will show you pictures of basically, it looks like 3 closets. These are racks. In the electric vehicle market, these are called packs, but in the electricity market, we call them racks. It's good to be in on the lingo. So these are as tall as a person. You see them incorporated in the larger picture. That's actually a demonstration that is run in our neighboring state of New York at the New York Power Authority. The partner, the commercial partner, is ABB. They, of course, have a long track record in understanding power quality. The system and the battery technology has gone through all of the certifications of all of the third-party testing, and we now have the opportunity to be super flexible on site. This particular unit is an outdoor unit connected to NYPA headquarters, and it demonstrates a little bit of peak shaving. Of course, they are in a cool place because they have all this hydropower, and Cadenza is in a cool place being an innovator, bringing safety to a new level and having surpassed all of the testing that was necessary. The next slide illustrates not only large energy storage, but now small energy storage. So this is a product that our team actually developed during the COVID transition, where we were not able to be in our labs. So we put our Excel spreadsheets to good work and basically developed a new system for small commercial and industrial systems for 48 volts, so basically residential type systems. Again, you see the signature, which is flexibility, and you see there an installer putting this into a cabinet. This we envision going into, and we have had a few discussions that are extremely interesting, to the underprivileged, so poor or lower and middle income neighborhoods. This is a 15 kilowatt hours, 5 kilowatt system, and we believe this will be placed mostly in basements and garages. The fact that it's so flexible, where other vendors have basically decided you have to hang it on the wall, we can hang part of it on the wall, we can put it on your floor, you can spread it out, and it basically goes back to the very simple concept, Lego blocks, energy Lego blocks. Really delighted to be here, really looking forward to the discussion.
Christina, that was amazing. Thank you for that. So for the audience, we're going to have Q&A all along the way, so definitely chat in your questions and we will get to them. But before we move to Dan Nadev, I want to ask you, Christina, first, what are the challenges of growing a company like yours? It's really cool to kind of hear some of the timeline here, but like what are the challenges you face growing Cadenza?
So batteries are actually really complicated. So I've been in touching batteries most of my career. So that's both fun and complicated. To grow a global play from anywhere when you're not able to travel and meet people, when you have limited access, when you have geopolitical tensions, it's very complicated. But at the same time, I am thrilled to be in Connecticut. I have lived in other places in the world in my past, and I find this state being so incredibly eager to work together to find solution. I also am super impressed by the fact that most people are picking up the phone. We can meet effortlessly. It's a small state that really can do something very cool. The fact that we're neighbors with New York is very helpful, and I was delighted to hear Chair Gillette talk about the reference with New York State and how they have made some advances. As a Connecticut-based company, we have had the opportunity to be part of that ecosystem as well. But right now, I think that we can have this Connecticut-based company, create Connecticut type of jobs, and launch absolutely world-leading technology inside our state, and use that not only as a trial, but actually bring both economic benefits to all citizens and create really a center of excellence for battery technology and manufacturing here.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we are going to transition now to Dan. Dan, let me get your slides up here. All right. Dan Nadev, CEO of Enviropower, who's going to introduce us to his company.
Bryan, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much also for Christina for a great presentation. I already can think about some ways that we can cooperate with Cadenza. So why power for the people? Why this is our slogan? It's actually simple. We started very uniquely as a startup by asking a business question. And the question, not so much a technology, we started with the business approach. And the question was, how can we actually have, or what is the most effective way to enable inexpensive, reliable on-site electricity to millions of homes, businesses, and buildings? And what is the best way to sell to people such a solution? The best way to sell this to people is by selling them something that they already and naturally buy. So let's ask, what do we buy to our homes and offices and buildings? Is it power plants or heating systems? And the answer is obvious. We all have heating systems in our homes, buildings, and businesses. In fact, we are buying 4 million of them naturally year by year to replace the older one. So what we did, and let's move to the next slide. In the last 8 years, we actually developed a seamlessly integrated generator into a heating system. It's a boiler with a power plant inside, and we call it the smart watt boiler. It's basically a boiler that is manufactured or can be manufactured and is manufactured with our partner Burnham Holdings as a boiler. So it's highly scalable. As a startup, we already have global reach on large scale of production because we basically produce a boiler with a power plant inside. It has a boiler cost structure, so it's highly affordable. Pretty much every building that can afford a heating system, and in the US we're talking about 99.9% of the building having a heating system, can afford that device that produces electricity on site, near zero cost electricity. And because this device, the smart watt boiler, has a maintenance cycle identical to a boiler, it's a highly dependable device. So beyond, and let's move to the next slide. So beyond producing huge amount of savings on electric bills and increasing energy efficiency and energy resiliency, lowering carbon footprint to the home, to the owner of the system, this great deal also of interoperability. Once you have a boiler, a heating system with a power plant inside in a building, in a multifamily apartment building, in a home, or in an office. And the interoperability is at the home level with interoperable capacity with other generating devices like batteries, like solar PV, to increase the flow of energy or to optimize the flow of energy at the building level. But also it goes beyond that into the grid level, supporting load management, including time of use and demand side management, because it is highly flexible machine when it comes to the generation of heat and power. And let's move to the next slide. So what you see, if we click another click on that slide, is one of our commercial pilots this year in Connecticut, where the smart watt boiler installed in an office building has replaced for the entire winter around 1,500 hours of operation, an older, less efficient boiler in that building, completely taking off that boiler while generating zero cost or near zero cost electricity to that building, lowering its carbon footprint, as well as producing high efficient heat. Our efficiency is at around 98%, We plan to expand that pilot that is concluded very successfully this year to many more systems this year, together with our strategic partner, Burnham Holdings. And this system that we provided, last but not least, this system that we bring to the market is specifically designed to lower costs for multifamily apartment buildings, and therefore definitely a system that matches very well the energy affordability theme of today's conversation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. I'm starting to see questions come in, which is great. Continue to send those questions in, and I'm going to ask Rudy or Andrea if you can kind of monitor them, and when we get to that portion of the agenda, if you could raise those questions. I can't see them on my screen, so I'm just giving you a heads up there. But we're hearing really great things. So coming from Chair Gillette's presentation on the equitable modern grid docket, you know, Cadenza, we're talking about reopener number 3 on battery storage. Here with Enviropower, we're talking about the energy affordability reopener number 1, reopener number 8 on resilience. So you can start to see how a lot of the technologies that our entrepreneurs are working on can fit within the equitable modern grid docket, but specifically REO 5, which has to do with innovation pilots. So again, click that button, sign up for tomorrow's workshop. All right, so now we are going to transition to Pete Londa, who is going to introduce us to his company. He is the president and CEO of Tantalus. Pete, it is all yours.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate the inclusion. Matt, thanks for the kind words. And last but not least, I guess, hard to follow the phenomenal accomplishments in technology that Christina and Dan just walked us through. And I'm intrigued by what I can do in my own home based on them, both of your technologies, to try to be more efficient. While we've just heard from Christina and Dan on some initiatives within the portfolio of CT Innovations, focused very much on improving the efficiency and really reliability, either at the residential level or commercial and industrial level, or multi-dwelling units for that matter. Tantalus is a little bit different in its focus. And as Matt had referenced, we just recently migrated to the public markets up in Canada, where our company was founded 30 years ago. So we've been around for some time. But with that said, the vast majority of our focus is here in the United States and certainly here in Connecticut, where I'm based. Tantalus, and if you can flip, Brian, Tantalus's focus is really geared towards helping utilities. We focus in on 2 key areas within the North American utility industry. The first is electric utilities, similar to the investor-owned utilities here in Connecticut. But we also support a large number of multi-commodity utilities. And what that means is utilities that are responsible for not only delivering electricity, but also responsible for the delivery of water and or gas. To that end, here in the state of Connecticut, we support 3 utilities, all of which are municipal utilities: the city of Norwich, the city of Jewett City, which is near that area, and then we actually also support Mohegan Sun, as it upgraded its infrastructure to support the casino and surrounding areas. Today, we support 185 utilities and growing across North America, everywhere from Alaska, across Canada, the United States, and down into the Caribbean Basin. We refer to Tantalus and sort of our focus is building or helping utilities build smart grids. And what that means at the core is automating and accessing data from a variety of different devices that the utility puts into the field. An example of that is taking a meter on the side of everybody's home or building where you are today for this call and turning it into an iPhone, accessing comprehensive data around consumption and power quality, voltage, and current data. We can track a whole number of alarms that will pinpoint for the utility where their pole top transformers are stressed, where they have inefficiencies at the feeder or circuit level, or most importantly, where their substations need to be upgraded. And so while a lot of focus on the automation of metering historically over the last several decades has really been about understanding consumption and automation of how we consume electricity and how we pay for it, there's a significant path beyond that in helping utilities connect to end devices like a meter or a load control switch, which would be able to interact with Dan's technology as an example, to help the utility truly balance the supply side of their business model and the demand side of their business model. And so to that end, as we continue to gather data from meters and load control switches or distribution automation equipment across a very comprehensive communications network on behalf of the utility, we then layer in a suite of software and analytics tools. Some we've just recently launched. And as we think about the resiliency component of what Chair Gillette shared, is helping utilities pinpoint not only where outages unfold, but more importantly, predict where those outages may occur. And for all of us in Connecticut, where we've witnessed a fairly disruptive storm in August that led, personalizing that, to a power outage in my home for over a week towards the end of August. Right? That's inconvenient for business, it's inconvenient for life, but when you have a 14-year-old daughter whose life depends on TikTok, loss of power means loss of Wi-Fi, loss of Wi-Fi means loss of TikTok. Boy, my wife and I had a fit, right? So I'll table my way we're raising our child for another conversation, Bryan. But with that in mind, how do we help the utility through a suite of solutions, automating their metering infrastructure, accessing and controlling the demand side of their equation, automating things along the way? That's what Tantalus focuses on. In terms of the solutions that we deliver, we take a lot of pride, and on the next slide, Bryan, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to build the sustainable utility. And as you think about that relative to Chair Gillette's comments on the broader equitable modernization of the grid, we're helping utilities access data from legacy metering infrastructure like ERTs, encoded receiver transmitters, which are prolifically deployed here with Eversource as an example. You know, millions of endpoints that are not yet probably at the end of their life, but we're unique in our ability to access that data from those devices to start helping the utility gain visualization and analytics as to where they can maximize their investment. So unlike a lot of companies that we deal with, some much larger than us, we're not ripping and replacing technology. That leads to obviously increased improvement from a resiliency perspective. And then we are aggressively working towards helping utilities prepare for the adoption of technology like Christina's and Dan's companies are offering into the market today. Rooftop solar, battery storage, electric vehicles, heat infrastructure, smart hot water heating, as an example. How do we help the utility access those devices, understand how those devices are working, what the native profile is of those devices, and then use those as a controllable resource to build a much more efficient and sustainable community. To that end, we're trying to help utilities provide better service and more reliable, and do that in an affordable way. And we're fortunate to support 185 utilities today, as I've mentioned. Thanks, Bryan.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Pete. So you all are hitting all of the reopeners literally in the Equitable Modern Grid docket. Pete, you were hitting on reopener number 2, which has to deal with advanced metering infrastructure. You also mentioned reopener number 4, zero emission vehicles. So amongst you 3 entrepreneurs and the companies that you are working with, and the technologies here in Connecticut, you are literally hitting more than half of the areas that Chair Gillette is working on, including reopener number 5, which is the innovation pilots. So I'm going to come back to both Dan and Pete quick with a question. I forgot you had Dan on the question, but I want to hear about what are the growth challenges to your companies. And why don't we start with Dan, and then we'll come to you, Pete. And then I've got a question for all of you, and then we'll go into the audience. All right, Dan, you cool?
Absolutely, Bryan, thanks so much. So obviously, beyond the obvious, raising money, multitasking, wearing so many hats, and we can all talk about that, all three of us, I guess, for hours. I actually choose to focus on something that I think is unique to every startup, to any leader of a startup, which is actually identify and stick to your core, to really what you bring to the game. After all the trends are come and go. I mean, when we started, a few years ago, the trend was energy efficiency. Then it was virtual power plant. Now it is hydrogen. And I think that if you are not up to the challenge of your core, really understand what your core is, you are shifting away left and right. And in our case, the core is really back to the sentence, power for the people. What we provide, what we are an enabler that allows near zero cost electricity on-site power generation. And what we provide is basically a choice. We provide a choice to a homeowner, to an owner of a building, to an owner of an office. When times come to replace a boiler, either you replace it with another old technology boiler that just provide heat, or you go and upgrade to grid modernization type of boiler that has a power plant inside.
All right, Pete.
Yeah, I'd echo some of Dan's comments, and the way we think about it in terms of growing. I think that the question, Bryan, around growing a company, I might just I'll provide some brief comment and then talk about maybe for Tantalus what we see in terms of inhibitors to growth. At the company level and in our roles in leading or serving in the capacity of leading an organization, I think Dan hit it extremely well, and we codify that at Tantalus into one word. It's purpose. How do we make our decisions and align the resources that we have available to us, which are always constrained for any earlier stage or smaller company? Resource constraint, whether it's capital or human talent, right? Human resources is or customers for that matter, acquisition. We're always constrained. So how do you, as a team, focus in on the purpose of your company, and then from that purpose, build your solutions and make your decisions that always come back to the purpose? At Tantalus, our purpose is very much focused on truly helping utilities and the communities they serve. And when you think about some of the inhibitors we see at Tantalus, in terms of growing our organization, fear among utility executives and regulators is one of the gating items that we have to navigate around. And the fear is not what to do tomorrow or how to go about their day-to-day. It's how to plan for the next 10 years relative to leveraging assets that they are responsible for maximizing value and sunk cost or existing infrastructure, right, that wasn't designed for the technologies and innovations like Christina and Dan have articulated today. The grid for us that we support with utilities, it really was designed as a one-way flow of power from central generation down to substations, across transmission lines, and to meters. It wasn't designed to ultimately deal with power coming from the home or electric vehicles or storage devices accessing and delivering power that the utility can control. So we refer to that as that transformation creates fear because the world's changing. We like to say, for the utility, when they think about investment, they're being asked to build the internet, and in most circumstances, relying on technology that ties to Morse code. Think about what it would be like if we relied on Morse code for today's meeting, right? And in a virtual environment, can't happen. Utilities are challenged in that capacity of having to continue to leverage and maximize the value of existing infrastructure that wasn't designed for the future innovation. That leads to fear. That fear leads to challenges in making decisions. And that's an inhibitor for us that we're constantly trying to educate on and address as an organization.
All
Sorry
right.
if I went down the wrong path there, Bryan.
No, that was quite good. So Rudy, Andrea, when questions come up, just chat me when you're ready with the question, but I'm gonna give the entire panel a question here. And this kind of builds from where you were, Pete. And this is the Matt McCooe question, right? So this is like your venture capitalist elevator pitch. So you all have 60 seconds to meet with the CEO of Eversource or UI, right? And you've bumped into them. And what would you say about your company, its technology, and why would ratepayers in Connecticut care about your companies? And let me start with Christina. Sorry, Christina, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. I would love to meet with the Eversource CEO. Thank you. It'd be great. Anytime is a good time, by the way. We're entrepreneurs. The opportunity for the energy transition and to do that locally instead of having that storm in on you. There's no question the mega trend is upgrading how we think about electricity. There's no question it's going to be distributed. There will be multiple stakeholders. There's a shift in profit happening not only in Connecticut but across the globe, where we're distributing basically who can own an asset. And as you think of battery technology, it is the simplest asset. In fact, one of these Lego blocks you can hold in your hand. If we do this right, you can click them together with your local technician, and you basically can do trading on your phone. So this is such a technology disruption. The COVID era that basically highlighted communication issues, maybe not just TikTok, a few others. We have an opportunity now to stabilize without going to emergency response, but actually fundamentally change, because we have the technology, we have the software, we have the hardware, and the people who are able to collaborate around these platforms will have enormous gains, actually both in the short and the long term.
That's great, Dan.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. And Christina, once you schedule that, please include me as well. I'll have to join the meeting. I used to say this privately, and now I'll make it publicly with the hope I'm not bragging too much on that. What I would say as a 60-second pitch, now 45, is that the smart boiler, from when it comes to the tasks ahead in managing energy at homes, at the grid, is almost the F-35 aircraft. It's a multitasking that in one single installation basically can actually cover so many tasks. It's at the seam between electricity on one hand and heating. So you don't have any other device in the market with a simple installation and low cost like the smart boiler that with that installation can manage and optimize energy flow, both on the heating side, meaning gas, and later on hydrogen, as well as the electricity side, all of which are both at the home and building level, as well as the grid level. And I think about that, I probably consume my 60 seconds.
Pete?
Perfect. I think what we'd say is, first and foremost, we're customers. We consume electricity right here in the state of Connecticut, and as a result, we've got a vested interest in making sure the utilities, Eversource and United Illuminating, are as efficient and reliable as possible. Second, as it relates to Eversource, they're under massive pressure, and I think Tantalus is in a position to help, whereby it's paramount for them the utility to start accessing more granular data at the very edge of their network from the meter itself. And we've got a solution that would not require the utility to rip and replace 100% of the meters immediately. They can continue to maximize the value of what they have while upgrading and preparing for the future as things evolve and change. It would be an immediate CapEx savings out of the gate to allocate those dollars to other initiatives across the organization. Ultimately, it would help them improve their impact on the environment improve their services to their community, and ultimately lead to better governance inside their organization in terms of how they're allocating dollars.
Okay, great. Okay, so the questions are coming in quite rapidly now. Let me set some context for this line of questions around equity. So, you know, we all saw the Biden plan last week. We know that during the Biden campaign, as he's set about his climate change platform, that it involved four things. One was reaching a 100% clean energy system by 2035. The second was decarbonizing our economy by 2050. The third was ensuring a just transition, family sustaining jobs, union jobs. And the fourth was ensuring that that the federal government invest no less than 40% of its resources in vulnerable communities and vulnerable populations. So there's a whole series of questions here around equity. Let me take the stab at the first one, but then I'm going to transition to Christina. But I want you all to think about how your technologies can help and enable vulnerable communities, low to moderate income communities, communities of color, underserved communities. So there's a question around what's being done to ensure collaborative stakeholder inclusion. I think this is referencing Chair Gillette in her comments, specifically around the Equitable Modern Grid docket and reopener number 5, which is the Innovation Pilots docket. I can say that the number one reopener in Chair Gillette's docket is energy affordability, and it is all about inclusivity. In this docket, the Innovation Pilots docket, we're trying to do our best to get outreach. So I would invite all of our audience here today to send out the stakeholder webinar link for tomorrow in the workshop. You know, being involved in a regulatory process isn't kind of the typical way of things get handled, right? It feels very formal, feels very legal. But I can tell you that Chair Gillette has set up an environment to be very inclusive and very opening and inviting, specifically within a regulatory process. One doesn't think that way, but she does. So send this information out on the workshop tomorrow and the docket going forward. So Christina, so then coming to battery storage, you know, how and why you know, is targeting your technology for underserved or lower income households? How can that be done?
So I think it's one of these moments in time where I and my team feel we have practiced all our lives for this. I came from a very lucky background. I attended some of the best schools. I had the opportunity to learn from some of the pioneers in the industry. I happened to be at the right time and the right place. But I always have felt that that gift that was afforded to me, or grace, is really an opportunity to not only pay forward, but to pay now. And it is with that attitude that I serve as a civil servant on World Economic Forum. I helped the state of New York. I served in the state of Connecticut in the Solarized Connecticut program as a content bearer, and I helped my hometown to get it solarized. I think it's really important we decide to care. And in this case, we have world-breaking technology. Like, it doesn't explode. It doesn't go into fires. You can have it under your bed. You could put it under your kids in your car and you would be fine. To me, it sounds so simple. And yet, you know, that is not the attitude of most of the players in this industry. And to now have the perfect storm where policymakers are saying, okay, we need to do something differently. And the general momentum is in on, we got to do it in multiple ways, on multiple levels. When you can come in with something that is so simplified, which is what we have tried to do. We have tried to put 20 years of experience into a little dumb battery. And it's like, it can't go installed upside down. You have to put it in this way. It can be modular. You can fit it in all kinds of spaces. I am sure this is not the only solution to do it, but it's ready, and it's ready now. And with some of the targeted programs in Connecticut, we, of course, already got contacts because of the civil servant work that we have done, maybe because we have some likability in the general communities and in the reputation of the industry that we do right by people. we were afforded the opportunity, not only in Connecticut, to come in and think about how do we actually do it. Our team are experts at cost down. We simplify stuff, and this is kind of our sweet spot. We've also been contacted by some of the Native American kind of reserves where they're thinking about telephony and bringing in telephony as this crisis of COVID was like, either you're connected or you're not connected. So telecom became a central point in the energy distribution. So it's like China just skipped over digging down copper cable and then do cell phones. Some of these underprivileged will go from not having access to having premier access. And that shapes and informs a level of simplicity for how we think about reaching this 2035 goal, 2050 goal, and just having an opportunity to be a leader in that space, do good and do well, is just wildly inspiring. It's a ton of work. It's going to take a village to do this. And frankly, all of you are already on this webinar or meeting together over the next few months. But I think we can do it. And I am committed to being part of that solution.
Excellent. And just adding to some of your comments in terms of some of the things Chair Gillette is working on regulatorily, as Connecticut transitions from net metering to a tariff, when we talk about behind the meter renewable energy, in a recent decision, the chair wants to see additional adders for homes in low income, as well as homes that are situated in distressed communities. The battery storage area, Christina, I can tell you that their straw proposal had twice the level of incentives for low to moderate income families than non-LMI families. So a very strong commitment to energy affordability, as you've heard from the chair in her earlier remarks. So Dan and Pete, so from an equity perspective, there are questions coming in, Dan, around the use of fossil fuel in your technology. So, talk a little bit about how your technology incorporates that and deals with emissions and is looking towards hydrogen. And then Pete, there are questions coming in around, I think you scratched an interest from the audience in terms of infrastructure, that you not only can look at advanced metering in electricity, but gas and water and all those other things. So put on your equity lens and think about how your technology might help serve in those areas.
Should I go first, or Pete, do you want to start?
After you, Dan.
No problem. We'll keep the same row. So I will actually connect the here and now with the tomorrow and there through hydrogen. I think that with all the revolution that we are going through in the last 20 years, which I'm very proud to be part of, being an energy person, with the shift that we are making towards better utilization of energy, cleaner or completely clean, there's still a dark cloud over that, and that dark cloud is energy inequality, and that's, I think, why we are here. And although we have excellent technologies that could actually turn around the game 10, 15, and some 20 years from now, but it just takes time because they require new infrastructure, they require a big change in consumer behavior. What we offer is basically a big change with zero change in infrastructure and zero change in consumer behaviors, because what we do, we just replace older heating systems with a boiler with a power plant inside. But I do want to go deeper and don't stay on the title level. I want to give an example of how we can actually make a big impact for every building, and specifically low medium income buildings. We are living in an era where those who have pay around 1.5 to 2.5% of their available income to energy, and those who don't, which is mind-boggling, pay around 10% of their available income towards energy bills, and that's what we want to change. So take, for example, multifamily apartment building, for which we have the solution today. The SmartWatt boiler saves every hour it operates $1 on electric bills. In multifamily apartment buildings, it will save around $4,000 to $5,000 for the residents of this building. That's the premium over a regular heating system. And LMI buildings, and they also replace their boilers now and then, can replace a boiler where the premium is washed within a year or short few months by the saving on electric bills and reducing their cost of energy. Now back to hydrogen. So hydrogen is something that we work on with multiple utilities. We're about to launch a major test of hydrogen with a major electric and gas utility in North America, together with our partner Burnham Holdings. And this is definitely the future. It will require, though, even if when we are ready, when we are hydrogen ready, a change in infrastructure where it's a collaborative effort and goes way beyond Enviropower, obviously.
Excellent. That was great, Dan. So energy burden reduction, energy affordability, perfect. Multifamily affordable housing. Great, Pete.
So Brian, a few thoughts for you. In terms of affordability, one item on that from the utility perspective is the historical way utilities have dealt with folks that are unable to pay their bills. Mostly when they just are not in a position to do it, is either have that bill accumulate and then try to access dollars at the state or federal level. The alternative is disconnect. And so when we think about equitable support, one of the things that we're seeing a significant number of utilities within our user community leverage today is through the data that we can access and the control that we can provide, is using an application called prepay, which effectively puts more power into the hands, no pun intended, but into the hands of the individual to manage their monthly budget. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, we're seeing this in spades across the United States. Certainly here in Connecticut, people are living check to check in many circumstances. And so it creates a very painful dynamic where you have to make that decision as an individual. Do you pay your power bill? Do you pay for food? Do you pay for other needs of the family? What prepay does is allow utilities to create a debit account effectively with the individual, and then through granular data, track consumption at the apartment, at the home, and educate the individual when they're consuming power, how they're consuming power, to stretch the dollars that they can afford to allocate to their power bills as far as possible. And as we think about time of use or modified rate structures, right, there is technology that we deliver today to utilities to help them directly engage with the consumers that are at the highest risk of paying their bills. So that's one aspect of affordability. The other aspect of it is when we think about equity across the utility industry, there's another issue that's unfolded. And if you can bear with me, Brian, it's the digital divide. Right? Everyone on this phone today, or everyone on this call, has access to broadband. Well, that's not the case in the most challenged economic areas in this state or across the country. And so what we're doing is we're partnering with utilities, and we really applaud the Biden administration on a number of the initiatives that have been laid out, but one of which is to ensure that every American has access to broadband. It's almost a requirement from a business, education, and personal perspective. And so we're partnering with utilities that are accessing dollars to leverage our technology to actually bring fiber to homes. Not only does that provide nanosecond response time on consumption and power quality to improve the resiliency of the grid, but it also provides the utility with an opportunity to deliver at a lower cost broadband access. And so that's another big component of what we're working on as we think about the equitable grid, how utilities can support their communities, not only in stretching the dollars they can spend, but also in the most challenged environments, bringing broadband services where it's just too expensive with the likes of Cablevision, Optimum, and Comcast. So the utilities really can fill that void, particularly some of the electric co-ops and some of the municipal utilities that we partner with. As it relates to infrastructure, you'd asked if I can maybe take a side step on that topic, but when we think about equity, if you look at what's unfolded in Texas most recently, right, a state that's invested heavily in renewables, Connecticut's on the verge of similarly investing heavily in renewables. renewables by definition have variability. And so when we think about when Mother Nature comes in and can disrupt the generation through renewables, whether it's solar panels or whether it's wind, we got a lot of weather patterns here in Connecticut that will make some of those resources, as important as they are, challenging. How is the grid empowered to actually control the demand profile when the supply side of their equation is under pressure? That's where some of the technology that Christina and Dan are articulating through their organizations can really be aggregated through a system like Tantalus is on behalf of the utilities when Mother Nature gets in the way. And she's showing up more frequently and more ferociously. So the infrastructure, it's the distribution grid that, in our opinion, is vital to being upgraded here in the state of Connecticut. And the recent stimulus package that the Biden administration is promoting and trying to secure support for, we think allocates almost $500 billion to support different elements of upgrading and modernizing the distribution grid, which is where we sit at Tantalus.
Just exceptional, Pete. That was great. You know, from broadband access to, you know, things that I think about in your response is Connecticut has an 80% weatherization goal. You know, how we decarbonize our heating systems and managing our heating and cooling, given the impacts of climate. It is what you're working on is just great and completely in tune with that. So I've got an audience question that I think is really good. So I'm going to ask it. You know, so what do you all think is Connecticut's competitive advantage with respect to becoming a global leader in accelerating its transition to an equitable modern grid? So given what Chair Gillette said, you all as innovators and entrepreneurs, you know, what is it that Connecticut has that gives a competitive advantage to your companies?
I'll go first. Let give Dan and Christina some time to contemplate their answers there. A couple of things. We've been very fortunate to have the support of CT Innovations, and I think the model that's being really done in partnership with the government, from the governor down to business professionals like Matt McCooe and his team. That is by far and away an advantage that we see here in Connecticut relative to pretty much every other state where we operate in the U.S. in terms of supporting utilities. It's that public government, private business partnership. Today's webinar is a great example of that. For that matter, even providing 3 companies and participants to gain access to the chair of PURA and Chair Gillette, and seeing and understanding her vision for the future. That's a very unique aspect of Connecticut. And I think, you know, more so than what we've seen is really the alignment of the business side of the state, coupled with the political initiatives and the broader political objectives of the state. It's really well aligned in our opinion.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in myself. Experience the potential to grow and growing in Connecticut as an Enviropower. So I believe that the question was future looking, but obviously we cannot ignore what Connecticut is already providing. I think that it's almost unprecedented that we have Connecticut Innovations that basically is with Enviropower almost since inception, and has played a major and extremely important role in our capacity, not only to grow, but basically to lead towards and sustain a cohesive strategy with their advice of the people that we interact, maybe not daily, but definitely continuously. And then you have many major building blocks in Connecticut itself that for us at least contributed a lot. For example, University of Connecticut with their Eversource Energy Center that is cooperating with Eversource directly was a big source for ideas, for grants, and so forth for us. So the existing infrastructure is already something that is extremely friendly towards startup in the clean tech ecosystem. The position, and I'm sorry, I'm talking about that from that granularity of in between to major other states is fantastic. I don't think that you can ask for a better location, because really traveling wise, you are within the area, the epicenter of where things really happening. And I think that also from the state itself, and I believe that Christina touched on that, and something that I would like to stress on my end, startups by nature do not work extremely well with huge entities, whether it's another large acquirer or collaborator. If it's too big, it's just two different languages. Same thing goes to state, and I've been working and living in states that are bigger than Connecticut. I think one of the advantages here is that is big enough to make a significant impact on the livelihood and the future of its startup, but not too big to become too cumbersome. I think that, as Christina mentioned, that it's a state where with a phone call you can actually make things happen, whether it's to the mayor of Hartford that is willing to help and support, or Connecticut Innovation, or through the network to approach a research center that is relevant to you. So this is another big advantage.
That's awesome. So I'll round this off and just echo my colleagues on this call. I think in addition, the fact that Connecticut is located really in between Boston and New York, we draw from some of that talent all the time. The fact that we have proximity to major international airports make an international business possible. The fact that we have very, very good infrastructure. I am a proud mother of 2 children, part of the public school systems. It's awesome schools. It is possible to be a female CEO. It is really hard, and it's not leveled, but it's possible. And I am so grateful for the culture in general of welcoming. I don't think I have any friends here, and that has not been my experience everywhere else, where it is a shameful thing at all to basically work like a pig and love your kids and walk with the dogs really late at night. You know what? Our stores are open late. You can buy shoes for your kids at 10 p.m. I love that part. So every part of just having life and kindness and support, the fact that Connecticut maybe feels a little bit more like a village, the fact that our like David Lehman is personally engaged and comes to some of Matt McCooe's CI's dinners, I think is awesome. Pauline Murphy, who works with Matt, has been just so accessible and amazing. Tony Roberto, you, Bryan, like there's so many people that go far beyond what the Call of Duty is. And I think maybe we just have attracted a few dogs that just don't want to stop running, and we will get this done. I am convinced.
So that was a perfect last question. So audience member, whoever put that question in, it was perfect. It was a great way to end this panel. We wanted to have this conversation today about clean tech in Connecticut to talk about the ecosystem that we have here. And if there's a takeaway for our audience today, it is that we have an investment structure with the state, and the state working with the private sector to invest in our early stage entrepreneurs and technology companies through Connecticut Innovations leadership. And then what you're hearing on the regulatory side through the regulatory sandbox, and what Chair Gillette is working on through docket 17-1203, specifically RE05, the innovation pilots, is a desire to try to connect those innovators, those entrepreneurs, to the utilities through partnerships, as well as to their customers, so that we can prove out your technologies and realize the manufacturing, the assembly of those technologies for our great state. So I want to thank all of you for being a part of today's panel. I think it was great. We had a really great conversation. So thank you all for the panel. I'm going to have a few final announcements here. Just wanted to go back to where we started with Chair Gillette. There was in the chat a link to tomorrow's workshop. So definitely follow this docket, 17-1203 RE05, the Innovation Pilots docket. There's a workshop tomorrow from 11 to 5 p.m. Sign up if you haven't done that already. There's also a written comment period for the strategy and the straw proposal that Chair Gillette put out there. That would be due April 23rd by 4. So get engaged. As I was saying, Chair Gillette has made we talked about access, has made the regulatory process very accessible by everyone. And that only helps our democracy, right? That only helps us implement the ambitious energy policies that the state of Connecticut has. So everyone take note of that. I also want to put in a plug for our next webinar. It will be a week from today, same time. We're going to have a webinar on financial innovation, ways to invest in the green economy. So we're going to have a small group of entrepreneurs from Raise Green talk about their crowdfunding platform that invests in clean energy projects. Kestrel Verifiers, they're a green bond, social bond verifier. And then Sustainable Connecticut. They've got a really cool community match fund that involves citizens in contributing to local projects. So join us next week for that webinar. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't promote our Green Liberty Bonds. Our board this week just approved our second issuance of our Green Liberty Bonds for 2021. Last year, we came up with this concept in honor of the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, which was to issue bonds, but to issue bonds to the people. So to your point, Dan, power to the people. This is investment to the people. These are small denomination bonds, $1,000 face value bonds. We'd go lower, and we're working hard to lower those denomination values. The proceeds go to supporting solar deployment and energy efficiency around the state of Connecticut, again, with a focus on vulnerable communities, ensuring that we support solar with justice in our state. So take a look, go to the website, register your name. You'll get all the information. All the documents I'm seeing as we've been talking are starting to move through, including our rating on the bonds. So within the next couple of days, you all should be able to take note of that. So thank you all for being with us today. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our keynote, Matt, Marissa. Thank you all for being with us today. Everyone have a good rest of the day.
Thanks so much, Bryan. Thanks, speakers. That was great. Really fun.
Thank you, Bryan. We'll talk soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.